Hello, I'm Jenn Wilson, Senior Programmer with Film Independent Presents, and welcome to this Q&A for the new Nat Geo documentary film, We Feed People by Ron Howard. Special thanks to our lead sponsor, the HIFPA and Vision Media, who hosts all of our virtual screenings and Q&As. Now please welcome today's guests from We Feed People, producer Sara Bernstein and editor Andrew Morreale.
We're going through very high water. It's the only way to be delivering food. I'm so glad that we have this track.
I hope we are able to feed the people, but I hope we are going to be safe.
For me, it was very clear that I wanted to create an organization that we will be able to respond to events that disturbs the lives of people.
I am José Andrés.
We're here with a simple mission: to make sure that food is an agent of change.
In a crisis, you call on the experts. No one was calling on the cooks and chefs of the world when there were people who were hungry.
The emergency has this amazing way to speak to you. You only have to listen. You can listen to the situation. You can listen to the wind. You can listen to the people.
Sara Bernstein is a huge celebrity to me.
Oh,
I've been a programmer for a long time. I was a programmer for LA Film Festival. We program a lot of your documentaries. I did Q&As for a lot of your documentaries, but never with you.
I know.
I'm so excited that you're actually here with one of your documentaries this time.
Oh, thank you so much.
So, Sara, you started, I don't know if you started with HBO, but do you want to talk about, just because we have so many up and coming aspiring filmmakers in Film Independence membership, do you want to talk about how you started your career in documentary?
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. And thank you so much for saying that, just about like all the great projects I've been able to be part of over the years. And I'm such a fan of Film Independent. The LA Film Festival holds a special place in my heart, and, you know, just love all that you and the organization have done over the years to really promote documentary films, narrative films, and really up and coming filmmakers. So thank you. This is really special for me to be part of this. As you mentioned, Jenn, I started at HBO almost 20 plus years ago at this point. I was at HBO for almost 20 years, and now I've been at Imagine Documentaries for almost 4. But it was kind of the first real, I should say, like kind of steady position that I had after sort of freelancing for a few years straight out of college. And I was lucky enough to be welcomed into HBO. I started very briefly in the limited series department, and then found my way to Sheila Nevins, the great Sheila Nevins, in HBO documentary films, or Sheila found me, I should say, and was able to really kind of build a career there. And as you mentioned, just work on, you know, probably hundreds of films over the years, and often with first-time filmmakers. And Andy and I collaborated quite a bit during my time at HBO. And it was an incredible experience. And a few years ago, I was approached by Imagine Entertainment, which is Ron Howard and Brian Grazer's company, to launch a new documentary division for the company, which was kind of expanding as more of an independent studio. And it was such a great opportunity that I just couldn't resist. So it felt like the right time to kind of embark in the next phase of my career, while at the same time a very interesting kind of moment in just, I would say, kind of the proliferation of documentary programming across all sorts of streaming platforms and, you know, just new avenues of distribution. So it's been an incredible experience, a whole re-education for me, but I'm really proud of what we've been able to launch over the past few years at Imagine.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Sara. For Andrew, how did you get started in documentary editing?
Oh, wow. I guess I always, I was a film buff when I was a kid. I always had the Super 8 camera. I got an internship out of college with a small documentary film company called Open House Films with Mark Obenhouse, who had done a lot of like PBS docs. And I just got to know that whole circle of people that at the time, that was the place to go. That was the only place that were making documentary films outside of doing like indie stuff that were televised documentaries. So I worked there for a couple of years and gravitated towards editing, and then had an opportunity to work on a spin-off of the famous Brain series on PBS, and it was called The Mind. It was sort of like a psychological version of the medical mind film, and got into the editors union through becoming an assistant film editor. And it was really great because I learned how to really edit from a lot of the guys that were working in film, both men and women in film, and actually cutting film. And so I really saw the change in the technology, and I was really fortunate to be able to see that sort of firsthand in that process and that discipline of storytelling. And then just got, as the technology advanced, I just kept on, and I realized that my passion was in storytelling in the edit room more so than out in the field shooting.
So let's talk about this film, We Feed People. I have to admit, I'm not a big food television person, so I only sort of knew who José Andrés was. But I went a few weeks ago to the Silent Film Festival in San Francisco, and one of their screenings was a tribute to World Central. They were donating funds to World Central Kitchen because the filmmaker was Ukrainian, and World Central Kitchen has an effort going on in Ukraine right now to help survivors of the war there. And so that was really kind of the first time that I had thought about José and thought about World Central Kitchen, and thought about the, sort of this idea that really this guy has given up his entire career in order to put all his efforts into this. So I'm just wondering, how Sara and Andrew, you were introduced to the subject matter, and why you wanted to tackle it as a film.
Yeah, well, I'll just start because on behalf of Imagine Documentaries, our company that produced the film. So this really started with Ron Howard, our incredible director, and he was, we had wrapped up or had premiered his previous Nat Geo documentary, Rebuilding Paradise. And that was, just to backtrack for a second, we started producing Rebuilding Paradise right as we launched Imagine Documentaries back at like almost the end of 2018. And for Ron, who had produced, countless number of feature films and TV and, just one of the most successful creative directors out there, he had started to direct a few documentaries, most of which had been sort of personality-driven projects like Pavarotti, where you have a very well-known subject and a life story to really tackle. But he had not yet really kind of dove into sort of the world of verite as us documentarians, live and breathe, or most of us. So Rebuilding Paradise, if you haven't seen this, to the audience, please check it out. I think it's streaming on Hulu, and it was another partnership with Nat Geo Films, who also partnered with us on We Feed People. But that was Ron's sort of first kind of, entree into that world of verite filmmaking. And I think he really loved it. He was really kind of struck by just the sort of unpredictable kind of nature of it, not really knowing how a story is going to end. And I think we were trying to figure out, well, what would be his next documentary and what could be another verite experience, but also one I think that really centered on and focused on an issue that could be important both to Ron, but certainly to a larger audience, even global audience. And around that time, when we were thinking about his next project, he had encountered José, and he had met him at several events over the past couple of years. And at the same time, World Central Kitchen was just starting to get sort of real kind of national attention. And we started to take notice, and certainly Ron did, that, wow, José really was growing this organization, and it was really becoming sort of a prominent NGO. Well, how did that happen? And maybe there was a story there that we could kind of explore. So Ron reached out to José. José was interested, but he was also very clear that World Central Kitchen isn't just about him, right? Like World Central Kitchen is an organization and a network made up of many people, many volunteers, many chefs, many people in the restaurant industries all over the world. And for him, it was really important that the film sort of focused on that. And I think for Ron, he was really, really interested in this idea of volunteerism, like what would make somebody sort of drop, maybe what they were doing professionally to go, donate their time to a larger cause. And that's sort of what led us on this path. We sort of, tried to assure Jose that, we would try not to totally focus this documentary on him. And we were lucky enough to find just incredible supporters and partners in National Geographic documentary films who jumped right on board, as they were also interested in what was happening with World Central Kitchen and Jose as a personality. So that's how the project got started. And for Andy,
I would just say that for me, it was really crazy because I had worked on a couple of Imagine projects. I did the Dad's film with Bryce Dallas Howard, and they're very good. The Imagine team is very good at being able to pair the right people for the certain projects. But I think Meredith or Sarah had said to me, "Oh, here's a list of some things that we're thinking about. What do you think of these ideas?" Usually they say that, but in this case, they said, "We have something that you think you would be interested in." I don't know how much they knew about my background in terms of volunteer work, but like my wife's a social worker. I volunteered for the Red Cross. I run a music charity event to raise money for local food pantries. So it was like, this is perfect. And the interesting thing was, in all the volunteer work that I've done, you never really saw the leader of that organization. You'd see the need, and you'd see what volunteer circle of people you can bring together to help facilitate that need, feed people, whatever the case may be. And in this case, I was fascinated by this one man and the origin story of him, and saying, well, he's the one that inspired people to want to go and volunteer. Wouldn't that be an interesting story to tell? And especially coming from the background of me seeing all of these very, very willing people going and giving of their time to volunteer to help feed people. So it was perfect. It was like a great connection. I was very excited to be able to do it.
So how many, this is the infamous how many hours of footage question. How many hours of footage did you have to get through to get down to your feature length?
Yeah. Well, at first we started to look at some stuff early in late 2019. We just had like an exploratory couple of weeks where I was going to look at some stuff before any shooting was going to happen, have conversations with Ron and everyone in the executive team. Hopefully they would bring a producer on at that point, but they wanted to know we got all this archival. So between what we got and me not even realizing how much was there initially, but between what we got and what we shot, which we did shoot an awful lot as well, it came out to about 1,100 hours of footage. And had there been 1,100 hours from the beginning, I probably would have run for the hills. But since it was things were coming in, and we actually tapped a lot of the archival material that World Central Kitchen had. And then we shot, over time, obviously on and off during the pandemic. But ultimately it was 1,100 hours.
Wow.
And also that team, to Andy's point, I mean, it's an incredible amount of footage, but I also think when we started this project, and certainly when Andy first joined, we weren't even sure, or it wasn't clear to us at that point just how important that archive of footage is going to become. Because as Andy said, we started this process in 2019. We very much saw the film as an active verite embedded scenario. We were waiting for the next disaster call that we would get, or that World Central Kitchen would get, that then our team could jump on board, get on the ground, and just start running with. And obviously what happened to many productions over the course of 2020 and certainly 2021 is that COVID happened. It took us a beat to really figure out, well, how do we manage a production during COVID? Can we even shoot? They were, off and running in international locations, which were not going to be easily accessible to an American crew at that point. So it was quite fascinating to be able to kind of switch gears and sort of, just in terms of how Ron and we all felt about the direction of the film. And obviously Andy was such an important part of that evolution, because once we realized that there was a real archive that really traced the evolution of World Central Kitchen from a grassroots kind of scrappy organization to this, much more sort of powerhouse, I don't know what you'd say, like kind of systematic sort of, not polished, but, certainly a much more well-oiled machine of an organization as you see them today. Once we realized we had almost 10 years of archive footage, we thought, okay, like we have a film, and we have a film that will really sort of, present that trajectory to an audience in a way that would be very valuable, along with obviously the original shooting that ultimately we were able to do during COVID.
One of the conflicts that there's several things that emerge from the documentary. I mean, not overtly, but of course, situations like these are going to become political on their own. And one of the things that was really interesting was the little conflict that he had in Puerto Rico with the Red Cross, which, I'm not trying to call out Red Cross. Nobody's trying to call out Red Cross, but it sort of brought up this issue of a ton of people trying to come in and help, and there being like kind of chaos and so I'm just wondering for me, I'm wondering, why it was in particular that you wanted to show that particular conflict.
I mean, I think it's important to show, the reality of the challenges that Jose and his team had. And I think, you can say, oh, well, there's a bureaucracy in place. And, if you just cut all that red tape, we can get a lot done. But there's also this concept that you have to coexist within the framework of that bureaucracy and the politics that are involved. And what I found the most fascinating about Puerto Rico, I mean, aside from my politics and how I felt, what I knew, and how, our government reacted to helping Americans in Puerto Rico, was how it helped Jose realize that he was going to have this uphill battle. So it was a perfect dramatic turning point in the arc of the story that led us down that path of like, he's going to be met with resistance. And once we knew that, then we could say, what is the other resistance that he followed? So like right from the get-go, as soon as we saw Puerto Rico, and having read the book and knew a lot about what's going on in Puerto Rico, we were absolutely convinced like that was going to be the political story. That was going to be the beginning of the political story, because it had all those challenges. And maybe it wouldn't have happened if anybody walked in, and Jose is a guy that like big and brash, and he was a doer, and he wanted to get things done. But like, he jumped on the train was half moving, and like he had to learn the system and then ultimately create his own system.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is Jose is he's a big personality. And I think without him having to directly say it, the film sort of comes together to say, where's everybody else in this? Like, when are all these other people that have all this money going to help? When are our leaders going to help? When are we going to figure this out? I think it was interesting because like Rebuilding Paradise brought up a lot of those questions too. Like, this is climate change, and fires are here to stay. Like, disasters are here to stay. And we need to figure this out. And I felt like the same thing was happening with this film.
Yeah.
Was that one of the reasons that you wanted to make it, was not only that Jose is doing this, but Jose clearly has a message for people?
Well, I mean, I think it was sort of an interesting discovery too along the way, right? Because I think, as Andy said, he starts off in Haiti and he's sort of ignorant to any system, right? He just is a man who wants to help and a man who seemingly has resources. And then I think we get to Puerto Rico and he's a man who wants to help, but he's also a successful entrepreneur. And he's sort of determined to get on the ground and really be able to mobilize. And as Andy said, he's sort of surprised by, in a way, how much he has to bump up against that red tape and that bureaucracy. And then I think you ultimately see him move into advocacy and policy almost. And toward the end of the film, you see him, certainly during COVID, he's talking to Biden, he's talking to Kamala Harris, he's talking to Nancy Pelosi. I mean, he's talking to, anyone in government who might pay attention. And maybe those people are also being, political, right? Like they understand that this is sort of an avenue that maybe they can help sort of push open and, whatever those motivations might be. But I do think that he has understood by the end of the film that his organization is only one organization. And in a way, it's sort of a Band-Aid organization, right? And that there needs to be a much more systemic change with how governments respond to these types of disasters. And I think at this point, the organization, while still doing, what their core kind of, philanthropy really is, and you see that right now in the Ukraine, I think there is also this other path where they're trying to, organize a greater sort of political movement around sort of food sustainability and the future of food. So that I think is really, really interesting. And that is something that Ron was particularly fascinated by, because I do think you see sort of one man kind of make a difference, even if it's it takes him a decade and he goes through his own sort of personal transformation along the way. But it's truly inspiring. And I think this is sort of where World Central Kitchen will move into. I think they will become sort of a more unifying NGO force.
Yeah, it's crazy how these documentaries really, point out what a meritocracy it still is. Are you deserving of help? Has the world decided that you're really deserving of help? It's one of the reasons why we would never just feed everybody that's hungry in Los Angeles, because certain people are deemed, people who are drug addicts and have drug and alcohol issues, we judge to have put themselves in that situation, so we wouldn't help them for free, right?
Yeah.
And it stands out so much, who we decide deserves to have help and who doesn't. And I think Jose's message is everybody deserves to have help. If you're hungry, everybody deserves to have help. So what's the update on Jose and World Central Kitchen? Do you know what's going on? I know he's in Ukraine. Do you know where all he's at these days?
I mean, I know that they are in and around the Ukraine, quite aggressively at the moment. I think they are also in other places. I mean, they were obviously just in Texas after the horrific school shooting. I think they continue to mobilize and go where they're needed. And it's really incredible. And I know we don't have anyone from the organization on this call, but it's a small team of people who are able to mobilize in incredible kind of community on the ground in these locations.
I didn't realize
they were right there with them.
I didn't realize they responded in instances of shootings in the United States. That's incredible.
I mean, what's really interesting is that goes back to why there's such an archive too, because in a lot of cases, they were the first boots on the ground. So they're actually getting the intel and distributing that intel to not only the world, but to within their organization as to what the needs are. So there wasn't just a need to let's document what's going on because we want to post this on social media to pat ourselves on the back. It was so that we could prove that this stuff is going on and that there needs to continue to be an effort to come and help. And so that sort of documenting of what's going on and seeing and making people more aware, it just makes the world smaller, and it allows for hopefully future change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was going to be my next question is what do you hope is the outcome of this documentary? And as filmmakers that are in, I'm a big fan of silent cinema, especially the progressive area, which there's hardly any of those films left, but films that were made by people who thought that who saw film as the avenue for massive social change. Just wondering if you sort of subscribe to that belief as well.
I mean, for me, it's, it goes back to something so simple that Ron said early on, which is that if this film can do one thing and get people off their couches to go and volunteer, and it doesn't have to be World Central Kitchen, it could be a local food pantry. It doesn't even have to be like fighting government, local government, whatever it is. It's just like everybody needs to be aware that there's a need and that they should step up when and if they can. And if that's what I care about most, that this film can influence that mobilization of people that wouldn't normally do it to do it. Great.
Yeah, but to answer your kind of larger question, I mean, I have to believe that this is where films, and particularly documentary films, remain valuable. I think if you can just, as Andy's saying, if you can convince one person because they tuned into We Feed People on Disney Plus or on Hulu, which we just heard is also going to run the film. I think if just a couple of people who knew nothing about World Central Kitchen all of a sudden started to pay attention to the organization or just to the idea of hunger as an issue or sustainability as an issue, then the film did its job. And I think entertainment can have enormous impact, and especially films that, that really focus on the human experience. It's not just about, talking heads feeding you information, but that you're actually sort of experiencing what people experience and walking in other people's shoes. I think it's the way we can increase empathy in the world.
To your point about it being on Disney Plus, I have proof that people noticed your documentary by being on Disney, because my mother told me the other day she went on there to watch one of the Star Wars shows and clicked on your film because it looked interesting. So bonus.
That's great.
We wanted it next to Obi-Wan.
Yes. Thanks, Mom.
So when is it going to be on Hulu? Is that?
I just heard that it's going to start streaming on Hulu soon. So I think I don't have the exact date, but I think it's imminent. Yeah.
Well, congratulations to the two of you. It's a really inspiring and powerful film. And I know that you both will be on a lot of documentaries again in the future. I hope that I get to speak with you again. Thanks so much for coming today.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.